G'day, Professor Joseph Drew here. I'm here to talk to you this time about the cash position of our amalgamated councils. I was asked this question after the last video I put up for the whole state. Look, the situation is extremely grim, as you will discover as you watch. At the end of this video, I present some solutions, and I'm also asking you all to send, if you live in an amalgamated council, send a copy of this video to your local member, and let's try to get these politicians at the state government level to A, acknowledge their mistakes, and B, do something proactive to help fix it and take a little bit of the pressure off the communities, because at the moment it's the local communities suffering for the mistakes of others. Okay, Exhibit 1, unrestricted cash. This is cash that councils can touch to deal with deficits, to deal with contingencies. It's like money in the bank. And I've plotted a graph. These are in thousands of dollars. I plotted a graph going from 2018 through to 2021 inclusive, remembering financial year ends at 30 of June 2021. We won't get this coming financial year's data until around November at the end of this calendar year. And we can see that the trend is down. Now, this top line here is quartile 3, 25% of councils sit above it. These are councils that started with relatively high levels of unrestricted cash, but you can see it's going down at the rates of knots. These are your big city amalgamated councils, and they're absolutely bleeding cash at present. Now, the grey line is the average. The average is not the best measure of central tendency. Any statistics book will tell you. Why? Because if you have one unusual result, it tends to skew it all upwards, and that's exactly what's happened here. So let's look at the best measure of central tendency, which is the median. That's the middle result if you put them in ascending order. And you can see it's been going down, but not as an alarming rate as our quartile 3 councils. But the problem is they didn't start with a lot of unrestricted cash in the first place, and it's been going down. But the councils I'm really worried about are these yellow line here, which is quartile 1 councils. 25% of our amalgamated councils sit below this line, and you can see they didn't start with an awful lot of cash, but by 2021 they've now got negative unrestricted cash. They do not have unrestricted cash. In fact, they owe unrestricted cash. But it gets worse. Let's have a look at this dark line here. This is decile 1. This is 10% of councils fall below this. They went negative in 2020 and they continue to go negative. And the trend is quite clear with these lower groups, of the ones that I'm really worried about. It is also downward. They're already out of cash and it's going down more. When are our regulators, our state politicians going to understand that this really is a serious issue? It doesn't get any more serious than this. I don't know how to convey that message through to them. If you can help, please do so. Okay, so there's a possibility that the unrestricted cash looks terrible because councils are stashing money away in these internal reserves. But remember, internal reserves should include prepaid grants, although a lot of the amalgamated councils don't have their prepaid grants counted as internal reserves. Now, if they do include prepaid grants, you expect it to be going upwards. Internal reserves include staff entitlements, which also tend to go upwards. So the fact that it is going upwards is what you would expect, but for a lot of councils it's not, and that's a real problem. So looking at the quartile 3 councils, they're the ones we're not too worried about. They've still got a good stash of money they started with. Yes, it's going down at the rate of knots, but they've still got room to move and time to breathe and to get on top of this problem. Their internal reserves have actually increased ever so slightly, which is a good sign, but as I say, it may just be the effect of those prepaid grants and staff entitlements moving up, so we certainly shouldn't take any comfort from it. Looking at the median councils, you can see it moved up ever so slightly also. Once again, that is what we'd expect, but it hasn't gone up dramatically, so it's not explaining our dire unrestricted cash position at all. This graph does not explain that. It's only doing what we expect. It's growing slowly because of prepaid grants and increase in staff entitlements. But have a look at this quartile 1 again. It's going down. It's a real or flatlined in the last 2 years, and so is decile 1, and that is extremely concerning. What it means is they've got negative unrestricted cash. They're eating into their internal reserves now. Money that's been put away for really important things like staff entitlements and things that must be done, the prepayment of grants that one day won't be prepaid, they're eating into that now. It can't end well. This is an extremely concerning situation. I wish our state government would take notice and act proactively to avoid a disaster for these communities. As I said, the bigger councils can absorb this bleeding of cash for longer because they started with more money. But look at how quickly that money is leaving their accounts. But inevitably, we're going to have to put up rates substantially, and lots of these councils already have. Cootamundra put them up by 53%, Armidale put them up by 20%, and yet we still see the cash declining. We still see a quarter of our councils with negative unrestricted cash, despite the fact that our internal reserves aren't going up. And that's even though a lot of these councils have not internally restricted prepaid grant money. Fees and charges will have to continue to go up, and financial sustainability will inevitably falter unless we do something, unless we are proactive. So here's some suggestions. Let's start a brand new grant scheme called the Amalgamation Failure Untied Grant Scheme, and it's only for amalgamated councils. It's brand new money, not recycling old money or reallocating fag money, brand new money from the state government who instigated these amalgamations. They now need to bear the cost of the amalgamations instead of the local communities bearing the cost of the amalgamations. Now, I've shown in my research that the amalgamations increase costs on average by 11%. So let's give councils all an additional 11%, completely untied, brand new money, only for amalgamated councils, and it's to make up for the failure of the public policy. Now, state government was warned by the great Professor Brian Dollery and myself prior to these amalgamations that they would be a fiscal disaster. They went off and paid hundreds of thousands of dollars to slick commercial consulting firms to produce nice glossy brochures telling you how it was going to save $1 billion over 20 years or some such fantasy. But you know what? It doesn't matter how glossy your brochures are or how slick the sales message is. If the numbers don't add up, they don't add up. They never did stack up. They never will stack up. So let's take responsibility for our mistakes and start fixing them. And one way is for the state government to start bearing the cost instead of the local communities. That's number one option. Number two option is that the communities actually pursue compensation from the commercial companies who were negligent, if they can prove that it was negligent in performing their duties. The state government could also pursue that compensation on their behalf. Now, I know that there is a national law centre interested in pursuing this legal action. Consultants, when they do work, have to provide it at a reasonable standard. If they were negligent, there could be a case to answer. If that can go before a court, perhaps the communities can get compensation for the millions and millions and millions, hundreds of millions of dollars that they've lost because of ill thought out, ill-conceived amalgamations. And the other option, and it has to be a live option now, we can't keep going down this road. We can't keep deteriorating at this rate and not have a disaster. The other option has to be de-amalgamation. But for goodness sakes, if we go down this road, finally, get some experts engaged. Do not go getting these glossy consulting companies again to do another giggle and guess and land us in even worse problems and predicaments than what we're in. We must stop playing and getting advice from clowns. We need to get advice from true bona fide experts, and the advice needs to be based on rigorous empirical evidence. Guesswork is not good enough when you're playing with people's lives. So I hope you found this video helpful. If you have, then please do me a favor, flick it around. If we can get the message out, if we can get people to understand how serious this situation is, maybe things can improve. maybe the local communities can stop paying the burden of a really bad public policy that was always ill thought out, that was always going to end really badly. It'd be nice if the people who made the mistakes started bearing their share of the cost instead. Thank you very much for your time. Goodbye.